Hey guys, in this tutorial I want to talk to you about why debt is so hard to pay off, and I want to give you an example of a really good friend of mine, John, who found himself in debt soon after university. So John was a good mate of mine at school and we stayed close friends throughout university. He'd always been reasonably good with money, and certainly through uni he had to be really tight with his money. But when we came through university, he got his first job and he was earning $40,000 a year after tax. And that seemed to him to be a huge amount of money. It seemed to me to be a huge amount of money. It was, based on what we had previously. But throughout that year, John quickly learned to spend everything that he earned, and unfortunately, a little bit more than that. So at the end of year one, John actually found himself in a situation where he had no savings, and he ended up with $5,000 in credit card debt. He'd got a credit card debt just to be a cash reserve, and a couple of things had come up. I can't remember what they were. I think it was the car needed a really expensive service and so on. But he found himself very quickly in $5,000 in credit card debt, and he was horrified to be in that situation. Now, what this represented then was, at the end of the year, when you take into account the $4,000 he had received that he'd spent, plus the $5,000 that he'd put on the credit card, he had in fact spent $45,000. And we sat down at the end of that first year, and he was absolutely adamant that next year would be different and that he would get rid of all of his debt and get back to break even, because he just hated being in debt. So we sat down, we put a budget together for him, but it was a really scary scenario when we looked at it, because in year two, John's wage hadn't gone up, or if it had been a minuscule amount. And so what that meant was that to pay back his $5,000 and to pay back the $1,000 in interest that he was going to incur throughout the year, he was in fact going to have to spend only $34,000 in that year. So if he wanted to pay back the debt, he wanted to pay back the interest, he was only going to be able to spend $34,000. So we were basing a budget on $34,000, yet the previous year he had spent $45,000. So what that meant was he had to reduce his budget by $11,000. So he had to spend $11,000 less in that second year. Now, $11,000 is a significant decrease. That's like taking away a quarter of your pay and saying you now have to live on that. And it was so tough, and I have to admire John because he did actually manage to do it, but it was a really tough year for him. He had to say no to so many things just to try and get back to break even. Now, I'm hoping that you can see that it takes a huge effort to get rid of that debt once you've got it. And the best solution to this problem is don't get yourself into debt to start with. Do not go there, and that way you can enjoy your entire pay each year rather than having to go through these drastic measures just to try and get back on top of it. The sad reality is most people could not adjust their lifestyle back to $34,000, and therefore they find themselves perpetually in debt, which of course is not where we want to be. So there we go. Quick overview of why debt is so hard to pay off.